All right. I'm sure we're going to have some more funnel in, but I'm just going to give everybody a quick introduction to our speaker this month, Jim Howson. He's a scouter active in the National Capital Area Council, where he serves as a unit commissioner. And he's been active in scouting since he was in youth. He's served on camp staffs in West Germany at Camp Freedom and at Forestburg Scout Reservation for the Monmouth Council. Most notably, though, he has taken this high adventure trip, the 2021 Antarctic expedition. He served as an associate advisor to the venturing crew 774. Professionally, he is the emergency manager for the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Diplomatic Security. He serves as a subject matter expert for the Bureau on Emergency Management and Disaster Healthcare Issues. We're really excited to have him talk today. It seems like most of his presentation is going to be geared towards this great expedition he did with scouting. So we'll have him speak and open up for Q&A like always afterwards, and then some networking and some breakout rooms. Thank you, Jim, and you can take it away.
Well, hello, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time out to listen to me. I guess it's kind of interesting that this is happening right now, because I don't know if you're following the news, but Ernest Shackleton's ship, which was sunk in Antarctica in, I think, 1914 or 15, was finally found, and they actually found it underwater. And if you may or may not know the story, it's well worth reading. It's called the ship is called the Endurance. There's a really great book on it. But what ties it in with this is not only did he survive the sinking of his ship and being stranded in Antarctica for over a year, was saving all of his crew members. He went back on a further expedition later in 1922, where he brought 2 scouts from England down with him, and that were part of his expedition. So there's a tradition of scouting going to Antarctica, first with the British in 1922, and then Robert Byrd in 1927, which we brought Paul Stipple down with him. So scouting wise, that's kind of some of the background with this. And Antarctica has always been on my bucket list. And so I think I'll just tell you the basics, how this kind of came about, and how my participation came about, and a little bit about the trip. So the planning for this actually started in 2019. And a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Bonzak, who works with the National Science Foundation and is a scouter in California with the venturing crew, has taken multiple trips to Antarctica, and in various areas he does a lot of under ice diving and research. And he took a scout from, or one of the youth members from his crew down with him on expedition in I think it was 2018, and they had a great time. And he said, we really have to do this on a larger scale. And so planning started in 2019. I became aware of it in late 2019. There were some postings on scouting Facebook and some other pages, and this is something that, again, I was very aware of and very interested in. And so I reached out and was able to sign on as an adult member. Of course, now I was talking 2019, early 2020, COVID really hadn't hit. When it did come, we were still thinking, well, the expedition is scheduled for 2021, so COVID will be long gone by then. Were we wrong? And so we kind of battled back and forth and getting things set up and starting with a lot of the planning. And one of the things that happened, and one of the crazy things that happened, is we didn't know exactly where we were going to go or leave from until probably September or October, and we didn't get a final go-ahead to go from the Argentine government until November of 2021. So it was almost up to the last minute that we were able to go. The initial plan was that if things didn't work out, we would push it back to 2022, but luckily we were able to go when we did. So just to kind of give a little overview here, you can see on the slide, this is Venturing Crew 774 from Ocean County Council. And Dr. Bonzak was the leader on this. And but they also realized that they wouldn't have enough crew members from that local crew to fill this trip out, so they opened it up. And we had members, both adult and youth, from all over, from Alabama, California. We had members from Canada, Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, and Texas. And you can see on graphics here, if this is going to work. All right. we basically formed up and met up in Houston, and we did that in very early December. And then from Houston, we took a flight down to Buenos Aires, where we did an overnight stay, and then from Buenos Aires went to Ushuaia. You can't really get to Ushuaia from here, so it's kind of a tricky thing. We spent a couple days in Ushuaia. We got there early because we were concerned about traveling delays and would there be other delays due to health issues and things like that. So we want to make sure we'd be there early enough to make the ship. And then from Ushuaia, we went to the Antarctic Peninsula. So this is probably one of my favorite graphic here, is kind of showing Antarctica and the confusing continent. If you can do, there's only one place on the continent that's south, which is the South Pole. From there, every place in whatever direction you go is north. But what we did is we worried about the Antarctic Peninsula, and that was our expedition area. And this is a graphic just kind of showing our travels coming south out of Ushuaia, which is in the very southernmost tip of South America. We came down through into the Shetland Islands, and then traveled through Shetland Islands, Deception Island, and then down to the peninsula, and kind of went and made multiple stops over the course of a week on the peninsula. Our original plan had been to also visit Palmer Station, which is a U.S. Antarctic research station in Antarctica, but because of COVID restrictions, we weren't allowed to stop. So we had to pass by, but continued on. When I was putting this together, they told me about 10 to 15 minutes, and I realized I've got so many slides and things like that that I could probably go on for 3 days. But what I've done is kind of front loaded some of the scouting highlights of the trip, and then towards the end, I have more wildlife and some of the other things that we did here. So this is the youth members of the crew. We ranged from the youngest at 14 to the oldest at 21. It was co-ed, and I have to say that about half of them were from the crew 7704, but the other half were from all over. We had, again, scouts from Canada. We had it from all over the U.S. And because of COVID and because of the distances, we weren't able to do too much in the way of shakedowns prior to the trip. And so when we first got together in Houston was when that first time everybody did get together, and they melded really, really well. I have to say that it was very impressive. This is the group on board the ship. And I guess I'm going to be honest with you. This was our nightmare moment here. This is doing COVID testing just before getting on the ship. And in order to get on the airplane leaving the US, we had to have a COVID test within 24 hours. And of course, it had to be negative. Everybody had to be vaccinated, and that was our requirement for the trip. And then we were again COVID tested in Argentina. But this was the final COVID test before getting on the ship. If anyone tested positive, they would not be allowed onto the ship. And of course, our nightmare scenario was that if one of the youth members tested positive at this point, not only would that youth member not be able to go on board the ship, but 2 adults would have to stay off with that person with them and basically stay in Argentina for the duration. So luckily, no one tested positive throughout the entire trip. We did very well with that. Everyone stayed healthy as far as virus-wise, although seasickness was a whole nother story. But we were all able to get onto the ship. And this was our ship. It was the Plancius, which is a Dutch ship. It was built in the 1970s for Arctic and research for the Dutch Navy. And then it was decommissioned from the Navy and then purchased by Ocean-Wide Expeditions and was used for travel, expedition travel in both the polar regions, both the Arctic and the Antarctic. It's not an icebreaker, but it does have a steel reinforced hull, so it's capable of working in ice conditions, but just not an icebreaker. It's about 300 and something feet long, takes approximately 110 passengers. We had 70 passengers on board the ship because of COVID. And that actually worked out to our advantage because there is a regulation regarding tourism in Antarctica now because they're very concerned about the ecosystem and making sure that things don't get overwhelmed. And you cannot bring more than 100 passengers from a ship onto shore at any one time. So the larger cruise ships that you see with the big mega tours where they may have hundreds of people on board, you may or may not be able to get off the ship at any point and in any stop, depending upon maybe what your numbers are, what's available. But for us, we were able to get off the ship every day, both in the morning and the afternoon, and do explorations and expeditions ashore. This is just a standard cabin. This is my cabin on board. Some of the youth had a bunk bed, so they may have 4 to the cabin or 2. And each cabin's small but comfortable. They had their own private bathrooms. But once we left Ushuaia, we have to go through the Drake Passage down to the Antarctic Peninsula. And if you've ever seen the old movies from the 30s and 40s where there's a sailing ship in the storm and they have the model getting turned upside down and spun around and everything in the waves, and you say, oh, that's just, you know, the Hollywood doing their thing. That was actually pretty accurate to what we were going through with the wave conditions. And this was a typical of a 2-day passage down through the Drake Passage. And just to give you an idea here, this is the bridge of the ship. And if you look at the horizon there, it's a little bit off kilter, and I've adjusted for the horizon just to show you, with the horizon being flat, and then you can see the list of the ship. And we went back and forth, and there was a lot of seasickness going on, unfortunately. I lucked out. I had seasickness one day, took some Dramamine, and was able to kind of work through it. But there were other people who were pretty much stuck in the cabins for the entire trip down and entire trip back. Once we got to the Antarctic Peninsula and around there, the waters calmed down dramatically and was much better. But the getting there and coming back was challenging. This is just one of the pictures on board the ship going through some of the ice fields. This is by the Shetland Islands. And again, you'd range from day to day. It could be completely clear or icy. And this is me. And this is getting off. As I mentioned before, we were able to every day, usually once in the morning right after breakfast, and then once in the afternoon after lunch, could get off and do shore excursions or excursions in Zodiacs. And this is kind of the group coming down off the ship. Along with, as I mentioned before, the minimizing the number of people going on shore. The other things we had to do was bring our outer layer of clothing prior to getting out, and they vacuumed everything to clean, make sure we didn't have any seeds or dirt or anything that from other areas bring it in, and contamination. Also, they issued out boots for everybody, which were waterproof to, for your comfort. But the other thing with the boots is you had to wash and sanitize the boots before getting onto the Zodiac, and then also after getting off the Zodiac back onto the ship. The main reason we cleaned them getting back on the ship is some of the areas there were lots of penguins and lots of wildlife, and penguin poo really stinks, and so you definitely don't want to bring that back to your cabin. So we were very conscious about making sure our boots were well clean once we got back onto the ship. But here you can see us coming down, and again, here's another picture, just the Zodiac's loading up. And we were able to do quite a lot of work and just going around viewing a lot of the wildlife. Some of the youth members actually had some science projects that they put together to take some samples of seawater, and we had some divers on board who were not youth members but were part of the Science Foundation's group who were taking samples, and they were working with that also. But here you can see just a seal hanging out on a nice summer day in Antarctica. And this is, again, very common. And a lot of these pictures I was able to take with my iPhone. So it wasn't even a telephoto lens. It was, we were able to get quite close, and they were just very happy just to hang out. And as long as you weren't bothering them, they wouldn't bother you. This is coming in onto one of shore areas on the Antarctic Peninsula, and loading and unloading the boats. You can see everybody's wearing inflatable life vests just in case. Luckily, no one had to use one. And this is some of the wildlife. And you can see here on the right side is just sitting down. And if you make yourself low to the ground, they'll come right up and check you out. They are very curious, and they don't have a whole lot of natural predators, some of the seals and things like that, but human beings don't hunt them. So they're very curious, and they'll come up and I would say friendly, as long as you don't try and get too close. But they'll come within 4 or 5 feet of you and just check you out. So one of the things we did, because we're scouts, we camped out on the Antarctic Peninsula. And so what we did is we were issued out the specific expedition bags that the ship had. And instead of setting up tents, we actually dug almost, I have to compare it to like little graves for you, trenches where you would dig in, get under the of the snow, build a little wall up around you to keep the wind off you, and then we slept on that overnight. And some of us brought extra comfort items with us. But here you can see setting up the sleeping bags and getting the gear. And of course, youth being youth, they decided that I don't care if it's cold or not, I'm going to go in my flip-flops and shorts, and even though the temperatures did get quite cold. Other thing is, talk about leave no trace. They're very concerned again as of contamination of the area. So this was a latrine, and so any usage, it was all containerized, but used in the little porta-john, and everything got brought back with us. So we didn't leave any waste or anything like that. And what we did with the camp out is had dinner on the ship, came ashore, set up the camp, stayed overnight, and got brought back before breakfast. So we didn't do any cooking on the peninsula. So again, you can see kind of the setups and how the bags were in the little snow trenches. And then we also had small snowshoes for hiking out and around. It's a little bit of exploring. But the other thing we did is we had probably the furthest south OA Brotherhood ceremony. It was on the Antarctic continent, and we ran that. I'm on the right there. It was very cold, but youth members set it up, and we had, I believe it was 4 people receive their Brotherhood. There were no fires. We had no arrows. We substituted snowballs for those situations. But they did a very, very good job, and they went through the motions and all the ceremony quite well. Again, there's another picture of the ceremony, and it is on the Antarctic Peninsula. Other thing we did is we had an Eagle Court of Honor and a Venturing Summit rank Court of Honor below the Arctic Circle. So I don't know if that's a first or not for us, but we did have one person get their Eagle, and I believe 2 of the youth members had Venturing Summit ranks, which they received. So I think, yeah, this is at the airport. There's a tremendous amount of travel going back and forth, and I think I may have gone through most of the scouting specific stuff here. So I guess I can open up for questioning because I've exceeded my 10 to 15 minutes.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Jim. This is really, really interesting and unique. I'll open up the floor first, and then I have 1 or 2 myself, honestly. Phil, I see you got your hand raised. Philip Sternberg?
Yes. Didn't we start a program in the United States where we would send Eagle Scouts down to the station that we set up?
Again, with the National Science Foundation, yes.
Right. Is that still ongoing?
I believe so. I believe what they alternate is 1 year is an Eagle Scout, another year is a Girl Scout Gold Award. I think though that because of COVID, they haven't run it in a couple years, past 2 years or so. But I'm hoping that they do reestablish it.
Well, what a marvelous opportunity! Isn't it amazing? Just amazing.
I do have a picture up. We did do a polar bear plunge. I did not go in. I took pictures, but was not a participant. But as you can see, that we did have youth and adult members who decided to partake.
I have a question from Christopher in the chat. He says, "Looks like you had fun. How cold was it?" I guess we talk about on an average day or night temperatures.
Well, the night it camped out, it got to -10 degrees. So that was pretty cold. Cabins were nice and warm on the ship, so that was nice. But there were days where the weather conditions were such that we couldn't actually go out on deck or even on the Zodiacs because it was too cold or windy. But the coldest it got was -10 during the days. And you can see here with the polar bear plunge, air temperature could be in the low 30s on a nice day. Water temperature was usually just above freezing.
Yeah, and Jim, I know you might want to talk about some of the photos as they come up. Feel free. That's fine, of course.
Okay, sure. Well, I've kind of, this has kind of gone through the grouping. I will tell a story on us. This, as you know, scouting is youth led, which leads to some interesting situations. And one of the situations that frustrated me, because I'm a planner, is that the youth were supposed to plan different activities, and a lot of times they waited to the last minute, or things didn't get done because of planning. And we were trying to gently guide them through, and that was sometimes a challenge. And then the other thing, we had one youth member came down and only brought one change of underwear for a 3-week trip. So we spent about I guess it was almost 2 days when we were in Ushuaia looking for underwear for him. And Ushuaia is kind of like Breckenridge, Colorado. It's a nice touristy town, but there's not a Walmart or anything nearby. So that was a bit of a challenge. But overall, they did very well. But we had a lot of traveling because it was overnight flights coming out of Houston and down to Buenos Aires. We stayed overnight and did a little bit of touring in the town. And you can see, again, the summer in South America. So our temperatures ranged from the 80s in Buenos Aires to the -10 in Antarctica.
Jim, I had a question. Actually,
yes.
I know when you went down to Antarctica, this might be silly, but when you're actually on the different land parts, there's no sort of civilization at all, right? There's no...
There's actually a little bit. There's some research stations, and I think I may have a picture of one of the stations that we passed by, but we were not able to stop and visit. The original plan was to stop at Palmer Research Station, but there's no villages or local indigenous population. Everything is a scientific research station.
At night, I can imagine it gets very, very dark, right? Like
yes.
Yeah.
And when it cleared up, the stars were absolutely incredible. We did not see any southern lights, which I was hoping for Australia Borealis, but unfortunately, I didn't see that. We did enjoy Argentinian beef and had an outing there, and that's in Buenos Aires.
Philip, I see you got your hand raised again. Go ahead.
Yes, question. Any issues with having a co-ed trip? And this was probably the first co-ed trip, certainly of this size, to Antarctica. I'd assume. Organizing all of this with both young men and young women must have been a challenge.
It was a challenge, in making sure, again, obviously in cabins, that they have to be segregated for that. We also had to make sure we had a sufficient number of male and female adult leadership to provide support. But they got along very, very well. We didn't really have any issues either getting too hostile with each other or too friendly with each other. They did mesh very well. They're very supportive, and the older youth supported the younger ones, and they were very good with this.
So how old was tango lessons? How old was the youngest, and how old was the oldest?
The oldest was 21. The youngest was 14.
Wow.
And we had some 14-year-old male and females, and we had I think the oldest female was 19 or 20, and the oldest male was 21.
And how much did it cost them?
The pricing was about just short of $10,000 for the entire trip. And a lot of the youth, they raised the money on their own. One did it through popcorn sales.
It's a lot of popcorn.
Yes. We did try and get some sponsorships, and we did get some things from some dive companies. We got some jackets and bags and things like that, but nothing really supporting the funding.
And I have one more
questions.
More from Gary in the chat. How did you provide instruction for the overnight camping? Were there instructions done on the ship?
Yes. Instructions were done on the ship. We went through a company called Oceanwide Expeditions, and they're very, very good. I was actually very impressed at the level of competence of the staff that covered it. My background is medical. I'm a paramedic, and I do a lot of operational medicine support. And going down, I thought, all right, what's the ship doctor going to be like? Is he, how good or bad is the person going to be? What level of experience? I brought my med bag just in case. And it turned out that our doctor was a surgeon who was qualified in aerospace and hyperbaric medicine, so he was very good. But we had individuals who were on the expedition staff who were their country's representatives to the Antarctic commissions. There were several PhDs, a bunch of master's level people. So when it came time to the prep, there was a very thorough preparation before any going ashore on proper procedures, both handling themselves in the Zodiacs and the boats, and dealing with wildlife, and then preparations for camping, and how to prepare the bags, how to use the entrenching tools and entrench yourselves, things like that.
Great. And Philip, did you have one more, or was that just from the last question? All good.
I'm sorry. It was. I apologize. I should have put my hand down.
No, you're all good. Just want to make sure. Does anybody else have any more questions as we continue to cycle through these pictures? If not, we'll do breakout rooms soon, and we'll let Jim talk a little bit more about some.
Right.
Pictures.
This is just arriving in Ushuaia. They have a new airport down there, and you can see scouts. Again, we traveled in uniform, which was very interesting in that having people come up to us out of the crowds and talking to us because we were in uniform. And in fact, in Ushuaia, we were walking down the street, and a guy came up to us, a young man. I would guess he was probably in his late teens, early 20s, and only spoke Spanish, and I do not speak Spanish. But we were able to kind of, through sign language, really, because I was wearing a necker, he kind of symbolized that he was in scouting also. He had a necker in his bag, and so we did a trade, and it was just really neat just to interacting with people. This is Ushuaia, and then again, you can see on the right side downtown Ushuaia, it's a very touristy town. They got hit pretty hard with COVID because tourism dropped dramatically, so they're very happy to see us coming through. We went to Terra del Fuego, which is about as far south as you can possibly get, and still be on the South American continent. And we did some hiking there. And again, before we got to Antarctica, the weather was beautiful. I mean, some of this hiking was in the 70s and 80s, and just beautiful days. This is the furthest south post office in South America. And so we were able to send postcards from that. And I actually sent postcards. It only took about a month to get home. So they did cycle through and got in early January. And then this is, again, Terra del Fuego and our hiking and walking through. Wild ponies, you can see some of the wildlife out there. Just absolutely beautiful area. This is on board the ship, and of course going to lifeboat drills, and we had the enclosed life boats for the passengers and crew. And then here's just some of the wildlife. We had just incredible wildlife, the whales, seals, and they just be hanging out on an ice floe. It's because it was a nice summer day for them, and we're passing by, and they might look up at you or might ignore you. And this again on the ship, and you can see just the ice floes that we'd be going through. And we did do some hiking a little bit more challenging than others on some of the areas on the peninsula. And the ship in the distance, you can see, and then of course up close with the penguins. We were able to do some kayaking and in and around some of the ice floes and a little bit of exploration. And had a barbecue out on the ship, a little cold barbecue, but it was out as on the fantail of the ship, and we were able to do a group barbecue. Of the passengers, I guess the scout group was about 45 people between the adult and youth, and then about 30 passengers who were either part of the National Science Foundation or had just happened to be on signed up for this particular cruise. And those, we had people from all over the world, over Europe and Australia, and I guess yeah, mostly Europe and Australia. And penguins would come up and just check you out. They were very curious. Yeah, very friendly, but they stink. It is. I'll tell you, the penguin poop is rotten fish smell times 10.
And as Jim continues to share some pictures,
Yes.
these are so great. we will do, I'd say maybe 10, 15 minutes longer in some breakout rooms I'll put us into for the networking portion. And we can come back here and continue flipping through some pictures while I give a council
Sure.
update before the end of the lunch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. 1 second.
Hey, Colin, I have to leave. I apologize.
It's no problem.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out. Hello. Hey, Jenna.
Hey, Colin. I was just gonna say, it looked like we've got,
Yeah, I think I might
four
move
and
Gary to room 3 and just make it 2 rooms
yeah,
with how many people.
because the other two haven't joined. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And I'll just split these 2 people up just in case they do join. I might have to go in there and tell Gary. 1 sec. Oh, you
No,
got it.
he's got it.
All right. That was good. The timing, I just
So-
had to get a little used to.
I was just gonna offer to the two we have here with us, Ulster and I'm not sure how to pronounce this first name. But-
Shittick? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, if you guys can hear us, if you want to be part of the networking, you can unmute, or we can also put you in one of the 2 breakout rooms.
Yeah, you guys should see on your screen invitations to join room 1 and room 3, if you don't mind, or if you're still around. If we think that they aren't around anymore, Jenna, there we
I was
go.
gonna say, I just put them in the waiting room, so
Yeah,
that
that's
way.
fine. Yeah. Yeah, I just have to get used to, I was gonna say the timing a little bit, like that was really good timing. But I didn't want there to be awkward silence in the breakout rooms or anything, or, I don't know.
Where did you leave it? Did you say we're coming back together?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
for the council announcements or that kind of thing.
okay. So let's not do it that way,
Okay,
because you just lost a bunch of people that aren't gonna stick around for networking that then missed the council announcements.
yeah. I noticed that after as I was saying it, 2 people dropped off and I was like, oh, that probably wasn't the right order.
That's okay. I mean,
They were the 3 people who dropped off had heard my last couple, but not that matters. Yeah, I should have done it before. Also, I thought Connor was going to be on at this point too, but I think that his meeting might have ran long.
yeah, that's fine. So how long are we giving them for networking?
Said 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, and then bring it back at 12:50-ish.
Yeah. See, it's awkward too, because you don't want to bring them back in the middle of conversation, but then again, if they're sticking around for council announcements and they're not doing a whole lot of networking, then they're just going to be sitting there in awkward silence. So
I can go in there and join both and give a little announcement if there's a moment I can insert myself. That doesn't bother me too much.
Connor's in the waiting room.
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't hear it because of the thing. There he
So
is.
maybe you should go into one and Connor should go into the other, or I
Yeah.
can go into, and then either way. These other two people I put into the waiting room. So maybe they're just sticking around for the council announcements. You can bring them back in if you want. Hey, Connor.
Hey, Jenna, how are you?
Good. How you feeling?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Still a little rough, but getting better.
Good.
I messed up, Connor,
Oh no,
and it's kind of your fault, honestly.
I believe
I'm just
that.
kidding.
What happened?
I didn't give the council announcements before the breakout rooms, so we lost a couple people. And now I have to like awkwardly insert myself in the breakout room to give my announcements. So
It happens to the best of us.
It's fine, Colin. Colin told them he's going to bring them all back together.
yeah,
So I'm just concerned they might be sitting in awkward silence.
I'm gonna
Doubtful,
go join
but-
and check it out. Connor, do you want to go into room 3 with JP and Gary and those guys, or do you want to go with the speaker?
You can put me into 3.
Okay. All right, and I'm gonna go into 1 and give my see how it's going first with the
All
right.
balance. Yeah.
I'll see you in a bit.
Jenna, what
Colin.
do you want to do?
I am going to go ahead and sign off.
Okay.
Craig was in my office for part of this, so I need to go connect with Tiffany on something.
Okay.
So I'm going to sign off, and then you guys can just do whatever works best.
Okay. Yeah, this one actually was really good. Really interesting.
Yeah, I was like, I really like this one. There's
Yeah.
penguins, there's seals. This is right
It
up
was-
my alley.
I didn't know he was going to talk about the expedition. I thought he was going to talk more about his career, which was very similar to Victor Esch's career. So I got a little worried, but then he went all Antarctic and it was great. So
Yeah, it was really cool. I liked it.
all right.
Okay.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thanks. Bye.
At all. They like, absolutely not. You're not going to travel. And within a month, because of the situation in Syria, they said, well, you're going to have to take emergency kits and nerve agent kits over to the Middle East. So they got me through a diplomatic courier class, and they got me a diplomatic passport real quick, and I was doing traveling. So it's varied and fun, but you have to be very persistent and in your applications. So other questions? I know I've been rambling.
Well, if everyone doesn't mind, if I can just add to that, from the USAID side, Daniel, I noticed, in the chat, you've talked about emergency preparedness in terms of your questions to Jim.
The big town of was in the big town of Wapakoneta, Ohio. So I was, which is only known because Neil Armstrong was from there, first man on the moon. And so I was in the same troop as Neil Armstrong. He was, I think, the second Eagle from that troop, and I think I was the fourth, but there was a few years between the two of us. So, I wasn't, I knew I had met him and knew Neil, but certainly was not at the same age group.
Wow,
And
that's
now
a cool story.
I've sold my printing company a few years ago. I've been doing management consulting, and now I work for a group called C12, and we do executive forums for Christian business owners. So, Colin, we're just doing introductions, and I think we've got everybody except for Alan, who was, I think,
His mic's struggling. He said he earned his Eagle in 2002 in Layton, Utah, I believe.
oh, wow.
But yeah, just popping in and just checking on both rooms, make sure there's no awkward silence anywhere. That's all.
Well, there wasn't until you came in the room.
Oh yeah, then everything went quiet. Yeah.
We were talking about you.
Yeah, I know. All right,
Colin, is that background from the summit?
I don't believe so. I
No.
Boy Scout virtual backgrounds and pulled it. Might be from a different council, but don't tell Jenna.
All right.
I think that's the summit.
It looks like the summit.
I'll
Yeah,
have to
right
find
down
it.
by the.
Yeah, it's a summit.
Yeah,
You think so?
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, lucky coincidence there. I'll take it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's it.
But yeah, I thought that Jim's talk about Antarctica was great. I'm trying to give him a little bit more time for networking, like me and Connor talked about, and JP a little bit too. But yeah, I was just checking on Connor. I know you started a new position recently, right?
Yeah, kind of. It's been a little bit of a mess, right? So I started November 30th at a new job. But then, almost immediately got sick, and I've been out for kind of weeks now, and this is my first week back. So I can only really say that I've started working, over the last week and a half, if I'm being honest. But I've been at the job technically since early December. But I like it. It's at an executive search firm that focuses on kind of tech startups and GovCon companies, and places C-level executives there. And it's a really nice company with some folks that I like and trust. So it's been a good experience.
That's great.
And I guess, go ahead, GP.
Colin, give us your background. Are you from this area, or what's your background?
Yeah, I actually got my Eagle in 2015 in Baltimore Area Council. So the neighboring council, and that's where I grew up, and I was involved with 2 troops there. I went to college for communications at Howson University, and then I started out of college working for Yelp, doing sales for them. And then from that, translated, I think I've told you this before, JP, some of the skills from sales kind of directly translated into my job now, which is in fundraising and special event planning with the purpose of fundraising here for the council. So yeah, I told some people today at the meeting that we had in the morning that I'm starting to get to the end of the line of my I'm new excuse with the council side. I started back in July, so about be 8-9 months now, so that one's going to run out. But it's been a great start, and it's great to be back involved in scouting and hearing different stories every day of the impact that it really has on youth, and definitely more fulfilling than my prior career. Yeah.
So for Baltimore County, where do you guys go where's your camp at?
Man, I just talking about this again. This one, it's called Camp Spencer, but I can't remember. It's part of a larger state park that I'm just like forgetting the name of.
Okay.
But it's funny, my troop, and I think this might be because Baltimore Area Council may not own that many camps in that way. They might just have this one that I'm thinking of. We went to New Jersey, to West Virginia, anywhere. We went all over for summer camp. We didn't really go to council camps as much as I feel like people do here. I'm actually going to try to find out what it's called while we're on.
We'd like to get a lot more people going to the council camp here, but we have a lot of people from the council that I think also go to Hinson over in on the other side in Delaware is a popular camp. So.
Yeah, it just says Camp Spencer, but I know, Broad Creek, that's what it's called. Broad Creek. And there's like a couple camps there. Broad Creek Scout Reservation. Closer to the PA line, I think. So I grew up in Hartford County, which is 30 minutes under the PA line, and 30 minutes above Baltimore, just kind of like wedged in between.
Okay.
So it's definitely more rural, that's for sure.
That's great.
Hop into the other room and see how they're doing, and then I'll pull us back in about 3 or 4 minutes. You guys don't mind?
Sure.
See you back.
So curious.
All like linking up with an Argentinian scouting organization in any way?
We made some attempts to link up with an Argentinian group, and unfortunately it just didn't work out. There's also a British group that came down after us on a sailing bark, the Europa, going back to kind of retrace Shackleton's trip from the 1920s. We were hoping to meet up with them at some point, but they ended up getting to Ushuaia about 3 days after we left. So it didn't quite match up.
Yeah, sorry to pop in the middle, but just checking in on both rooms, making sure there's no awkward silence or anything. Glad to hear you guys talking about some different things with the career and also the trip. And thanks again, Jim, for the presentation. It was really great and really interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
We could sit and look at those pictures all the rest of the day, I think, if you just let them run through. But some really great stuff captured there. I think Daniel's still putting some stuff in the chat. Can you guys see this, or is it just going to me? Can't tell.
No, at least some of what he's putting in is going to us.
All right, good.
Yep.
And Blair, you said that you were involved with
With USAID, U.S. Agency
USAID?
for International Development, yeah.
and what do you do with them?
I work on our democracy, human rights, and governance programming.
Great.
I'm a foreign service officer, so I have been overseas, but right now I'm doing a DC tour.
Awesome. Thanks for coming out. And Sven? Who are you involved with?
I work for the Department of Labor, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration,
Great.
and I'm a industrial hygiene supervisory industrial hygienist with the agency here. So I work in our Office of Health Enforcement. Most of our work of late has been about COVID, protecting healthcare workers and workers in the workplace here. So it's for the 2 years, it's been go, protect.
Yeah.
So
Gave you guys a lot of stuff to do, huh?
we were always busy.
Yeah, always busy.
We're always busy. So there's never I always expected Fridays to be a down day, but no, went through the weekends here. So
Yeah.
But
Well,
glad
thanks for the
to
work.
help out, make sure people understand, what working with CDC, our partners in CDC with NIOSH, making sure that those workers are protected, so we don't, so people can go home to their families safe. So,
Great. Thanks for the work you do, and thanks for coming out to the lunch.
sure.
And Daniel, I saw your chat message. EO Scott from Portland, living in DC for a little while, and that's how you got involved. Thanks for coming out to the lunch as well. Probably going to pull everybody back in just a minute, so I'm going to hop back to the main room. And I'll see you guys in there for just a few minutes of updates, and then we'll be breaking up. Thanks. All right, I think everybody that's stayed on is back. Lost a couple in translation with the networking. Probably should have done my announcements beforehand, so I'll remember that for next time. But I did want to actually take just a second, because Connor had a work call before, to introduce Connor to anybody that hasn't been on the lunch before. He's our head volunteer for these lunches, and he's going to be helping us over the next few months even more, trying to refine and shape these to being something even greater. I know that we had a survey go out about if you guys would like them to be in person with a hybrid option or different options that we have. So he's going to be working with us on that, and he's usually going to be taking the lead as well when he doesn't get tied up. So just letting you know his name and his face. Other than that, just brief announcements, same as before, but we have a little bit more information to share, I guess, about one of our events. First, the NESA event, still coming up on March 23rd, getting a lot closer. So if anybody wants to come out and help celebrate those 9 award recipients that we have, then feel free to do that and go ahead and sign up on the website, which I'll drop a link to in the chat. Outside of that, we have our little bit less formal Eagle re-engagement event, which will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of NESA. Both of these events, including this one, will be held at Army Navy Country Club, and they have a beautiful outdoor patio, which at the end of April should be heavily utilized for this event, and it'll be great with some drinks and snacks and networking. A lot of our lunch speakers and distinguished Eagles will be there, or NOESAs will be there, as well as we have Norm Augustine, who will be speaking at this event. And he is the U.S. Aerospace Businessman served as United States Under Secretary of the Army, and he's the past chairman and CEO of the Lockheed Martin Corporation. That event is April 27th. So be sure to take it down, and we'll have a website up for that soon. That is all I have from council announcement side. I'll go ahead and drop this link for you guys before you head off. And thanks so much, Jim, again, for coming out, presenting, and all the great pictures that you had to share.
Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation. Hey, one quick thing. If you guys have not seen or heard Neil Augustine speak, it's worth coming out to hear. He's just got incredible stories. And he was actually the first president of Lockheed and Martin. So when Lockheed joined Martin Marietta, he took over as president, and then he was, I think, chairman of the board of Black & Decker for a long time as well. So he's just got incredible stories. We've had him speak at some of our Eagle events in the past.
If you guys have any pre-interest based off what JP said or just what you heard about the event, feel free to email me and just let me know that's something you're interested in coming to, and I'll get you on the list for whenever the registration officially goes up. But yeah, should be a great event, great keynote speaker. If anybody has to run, no problem. Thanks a lot for coming out again. And we'll have another one coming up next month. Thomas Acklin will be our speaker, I believe. And then in May, we have Alan Kilsheimer speaking. So that's our lineup coming up. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jim. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Colin, Connor, I was gonna say that I have networked with Elizabeth, and we followed up with that, so.
Oh, great. How was that?
It was good. So put her in touch with some people, and haven't heard back, so I take no news as good news, so.
Hopefully.
Yep.
I'll send her a note, but I appreciate you doing that.
Yep, no
It's
worries.
tough in that early period right out of college. It's hard to kind of get your bearings and know where to push yourself.
Well, that's why we're here, and that's case in point for these connections. It doesn't have to be just Eagles too, so.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jim, could you share your slideshow with me possibly over email or anybody else, just so I can look at those pictures that you guys have? Being good to see all of them.
Yeah, it's because of pictures, it's large. I can try sending it to through email. But yeah, let me see what I can do about sharing it with you.
All right, great. Yeah, I'd love to see the rest of the pictures. I didn't mean to cut you short or anything. We try to get a little bit more networking this time.
I understand.
Still ended about 5 minutes early, so I timed it a little wrong, but.
I did have a question for Jim.
Yeah.
So Jim, did they talk about, or have you seen effects of tourism in Antarctica and or climate change?
Well, to be honest with you, this is my first time to Antarctica, so I can't say that I could see any climate change issues. They were talking about that. I will note that I've been up to Alaska a bunch of times, and I've seen significant climate change issues there. Like the Mendenhall Glacier has retreated dramatically from the first time I was up there about 15 years ago. So you see those issues. Antarctica, I don't think is being hit as bad as the Arctic regions with climate change, although that was one of the things. They would have regular talks on the ship, usually after dinner, discussing some topics like this, and climate change was one that was covered several times.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, did you have anything else for me or Connor?
No, I think that's it.
All right, great. Hope to see you out at some of the lunches coming up, and possibly some of these events too. It'd be great.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed coming to the in-person lunches. I went to them for a bit. My old office was actually less than a mile down the road from where we were having them, and I've tried to get onto some of the virtual ones. So hopefully we'll get back in person at some point.
Yeah, we're actually about to talk about that today. We think that maybe offering quarterly in-persons with some with the networking still every month could be a good option just to give people flexibility. But yeah, we're going to talk over some stuff for sure. How do you feel about that, Gary? I know you come to every single one virtually now almost.
Oh, I certainly love, it's hard for me to get around the Beltway for an in-person. So this is, to me, this is wonderful. And to be able to hear this diversity of talks and just, it's an impressive group in all ways. So here's one of the benefits of these virtual meetings. I think this is terrific.
Yeah, Tyson is great, and it works well for me because I live down the road from it. But the problem is it only works for people who work in Tyson's. And the same thing ends up being true for Reston, Foggy Bottom, downtown, anywhere you go. It's just so hard to get around. So we're trying to find a nice balance where we still get in-person networking opportunities, but we're also not, making it so that it's only the same 15 people who happen to work real close by. Because of course there's, like you, Gary, we've got a lot of people now who are in DC, like Dave Scott, who make it to pretty much every one of these virtually, and they just wouldn't be able to do it if we were outside the Beltway. So hopefully we strike a balance. But
I'm in favor of going to a hybrid model.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. I think that's probably the best, at least do quarterly in-persons or something like that.
Yeah. So, well, we'll certainly let you guys know what we end up, what ideas we come up with, and we'll move forward from there. But I think we're in a good place.
Yeah, no, it's just my hat's off to you guys for the time you spent making it successful, and the participants. It's just been, I get pretty giggly about these meetings because I love the diversity of topics, and that's great.
Well, we're glad.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And yeah, today's with Antarctica was just so cool. So I really appreciate that, Jim.
Oh, thank you. All right.
All right, everybody.